Hang on a second, I'll be right back. So about a week ago, I made a video on reviewing the First Descendant. After 30 hours of play, the plan was to record my initial thoughts after the 30 hours, then go to bed and the next day review the footage and see if I had the same thoughts. Instead, I uploaded the initial thoughts as it was already a lengthy video anyway. To summarize that video, the game is good, but it looks like a generic sci-fi and I'm not sure about the longevity of the game. Since then, I put in another 50 hours almost, and for some reason, I can't stop playing. So I've been wondering why this is, and I feel like the roadblocks don't come as early as other games. Like, for example, Synced, the roadblock came about after 8 hours, and it just was like such a massive roadblock, and it became such a grind that I just didn't want to play. I feel like in the First Descendant, sure, there's some people are saying like the Dead Bride is a massive roadblock or a DPS check. I didn't have too much trouble with them. And then people are saying Devourer, again, I didn't have too much trouble. I think it was like the 5th attempt I finally beat the Devourer. And a lot of it was just down to having a decent team that could out damage it, and when it brings up its healing tubes, just be able to destroy them quite quickly. It also helps that everybody gets bunny and the boss is weak to electrical moves. I feel like the Pyromancer is the first true roadblock because it just took me days to get past, and by then you semi have a sense of knowing what to do and other activities of unlocking Descendants because you've already technically unlocked Bunny, and then you realize, well, if I go do these instances I can get components for new Descendants, and then by then you're been beating a number of void bosses, so you realize, oh hey, I can also get other Descendants components to make them by beating bosses. So you start doing that and you realize 20 hours in you can do other stuff rather than beat the void bosses. And then eventually I managed to get a decent team and we beat the boss. It was quite funny because the day we did it free. It took 3 attempts on that one day. It's taken me, I God knows how many attempts to beat that boss, Pyromancer. But that day, the first run, it went really well. It was super close, and me and my friend basically went, okay, if we bring in launchers to start the fight, and then we just switch to our other weapons just to destroy it, and then when we get relauncher ammo again, we can go back in and start wrecking it. We should be able to beat it. So we got 2 other randoms in who weren't as good, but we were getting closer, and we were like, okay, so if we had the first random lot in, first 2 randoms, we would have done it. So the 3rd attempt went in and we had 2.5 minutes to spare. The other previous attempts were just, we ran out of time. You only have 10 minutes to beat these void bosses, and it essentially is just how much damage you can do. I think now it should be less of a problem because the issue is playing it very quickly, very early on. There's a lot of people who are getting to the same point as you, and all the other people are past that point. So what you tend to find is maybe like one person has already beaten this boss and they're usually rage quitting out if they're not getting it quick enough because they just want the stuff, they want the materials, they want to do the pattern thing to get their components, and then they want to go. For example, I was grinding out Ultimate Bunnies stuff and I just kept doing the, I think it's the Dead Bride. It's the second one, I think, yeah, I think it's the second void boss. I just went in, boom, 30 seconds, boss done. No, it was the 3rd boss, chain guy. Basically, the executioner. There we go. I go in, kill it, 30 seconds, immediately, check the pattern, leave. Go back in, 30 seconds. So you're going to start seeing more people doing that for the Pyromancer and stuff. So the more people that are now closer or at endgame, the more people are going to come in and go back to the earlier bosses and just completely wreck them because they have better gear. Speaking of endgame, so let's talk about endgame. Endgame is basically regular game, but everything's set to level 100. So all the enemies do more damage, all the item drops are now level 100. So essentially you don't need to go and do all these areas again. You can do them whatever order. You're basically going through each instance and seeing what they drop, what patterns they drop for what items you or components you need for the certain Descendants. Dungeons or instances function very differently now. They're essentially going to have new missions inside of them. The bosses are the same, but what you do in the dungeon might be different. The layout's the same, but maybe there's new lasers added. You now need to go collect orbs and where you didn't. There's new enemy placement, so there might be more enemies where normally they would just be empty areas. If you play through the regular game on normal mode and you enter into area and nothing happens and you just move along and you're like, well, this would be a great place to have some enemies or something to do here. That's because in endgame, in the hard mode dungeons, there is actually something to do there, which kind of makes the base game dungeons feel, or instances feel a lot more empty. Also, the whole point of the instance has a point-based system, so the higher the score, the better rewards. If you get a higher score, you're going to get more likely the stuff you want and more of it, so you can get multiple of the same pattern in one run if you do get a higher score. How do you get a higher score? Kill enemies, do the missions in a good time, but also there's now multipliers or modifiers to the dungeon, similar to Diablo 4, where you can, for their nightmare dungeons, in this you can increase enemies' health, decrease your own health, do less damage, enemy does more damage, etc, etc. By adding these multipliers in, you're going to get a higher score and essentially get the patterns you want. There's also regular missions you can do, which also drops modules that you may want, weapons that you may want, and sometimes patterns that you may want. So you may need to go and destroy a facility or destroy some power packs, but you have a much shorter time to do it. So you may have, like regular game, a couple of minutes. In base game, you have a minute to do it, destroy it, and then you have a chance of dropping a pattern, which may be what you need to get a Descendant you want. Lots of options, lots of stuff to do, but it's mainly just incrementally getting more and more powerful, as well as trying to unlock the Descendants you want and their ultimate versions. That's the end game. It's very repetitive, but the nice thing is going into instance and changing up, making it harder, adding the multipliers. If you like that sort of repetitive thing, like in Diablo 4, then you're going to enjoy this. But it is just trying to get the Descendants you want and then making your own Descendants slightly more powerful. It's alright. So if we're talking about all the dungeons, end game sort of, I'm going to talk about the Descendants now themselves, because now that I've played with like 5 different Descendants, they all play very differently or different enough. So the first one, Vesa, just does AoE damage. She has an ice attack that creates like a wave of ice in front. Then she does like, her first attack is just like just throws an ice shard, which is just a nice standard attack. Her movement attack just creates an ice field around her that does damage, and then her final attack is a ice ball that just does area of ice damage. It's great. It's fine. And then you go to Bunny, and Bunny's kind of the interesting one, which teaches you that not all Descendants are going to play the same. There's some technical stuff to them, I should say. So Bunny's all about building up charge, so you need to be constantly moving with Bunny. If you stop and stand still, Bunny loses charge. Bunny only has one move that costs MP, which is her C move, which is her movement. So you can just hit C, you run super fast, and it builds up charge massively. And then all other abilities cost charge. So her first ability is like a stun thing, doesn't too much damage. Not a lot of people like it because you have to be quite close to the enemy. And if you have enemies all similar closeness to you, they should all get hit. It's fine. But her third ability, her V ability, creates electrical field around her that does damage every couple of seconds, anything that's in it. Which is perfect for get rid of the bosses, because they all have balls and all the balls need to be damaged. And a lot of the bosses, sometimes all the balls need to be destroyed at the same time or with relatively quick succession, and Bunny can just take care of that super easy. In fact, a lot of the defense missions I've seen Bunny be played, and they just run around building up charge and then using the V ability to just destroy all these enemies, especially if they're in like lower level defense missions where there isn't too much trouble. Enemies just can be like one shot by these abilities. Her final ability is a charge beam. If you're at full charge and you use this, you can do an insane amount of damage, which is perfect for void bosses. So Bunny is basically teaching you need to build up charge, and all these abilities work together. So you can use your C and your B to run around super fast while building up charge, while also hitting as many enemies because you're all in your field. Next up is the poison one, Freya, which is basically you do damage over time. That's it. You can set poison You can throw a poison thing at them and it creates a little poison, not poison the enemy. Then you can create a shield that increases your poison resistance, I believe it is. And then you can throw down this thing on the ground that poisons the area. And then her fire ability is you take out a machine gun and you start firing poison bullets. Basically, this is damage over time. Then my final one I think I've got, no, there's another one. Falbury is a water-based one. So you're just using water to hit them. So there's her first move, which is basically throws a water puddle at enemies that bounces around and can do damage and bounces off stuff. Her second one, C, is movement. So she basically can set up a teleport and then goes under the water and then comes back up, which can do some splash damage, which is great movement tech. So you can get in and out of situations. You can move closer to an enemy if you need to be. It's a lot of fun. And then she has a movement move, V, where she just glides on the water, letting water be produced, and enemies get hit by the water, they take damage. And her final move is just basically a water launcher, which puts enemies into a bubble, so they're stopped, and you can, obviously the rest of the teammates can shoot at them. There's another hero, I forget the name is, but they go invisible. So their movement is, they have a sword strike. They're also electrical based, so there's descendants. Some descendants may have the same elemental type, but they also are electrical based. They swing their sword in an arc form, so they can do not an area of damage. They can hit all the enemies in front of them. The next move is invisibility, which is very useful for picking up descendants because it just massively de-aggroes you. And enemies and bosses tend to not shoot at you while you're down if there's another enemy around or another player around. So the AI can kind of get confused because it's like, even though there's just two of you in this fighting these enemies, the enemy's like, well, there's someone still around, so let's go find them. And so you have time to pick up your ally and get out. Their next move is essentially a stun. And then finally, their ultimate attack, basically any enemy in front of you, you highlight them with like a red dot, and then you just throw the blades. The whole idea is that you want to do this while not being seen. So you use your C to go invisible to activate the move because you are just standing there and you're very vulnerable. The V move is just to stun them, and then the first move, the Q move, is just area. You do a arching swing to do damage enemies right all in front of you. So obviously you can go invisible, go behind them, swing your sword, and then just shoot them. And that's all the ones that I've gotten so far. I did unlock another one last night, Blair, but I haven't had a chance to play with them yet. Speaking of Descendants, there are like legendary modules, they're orange, that often changes the way an ability works. So for example, with Bunny, I have this legendary module that reduces the amount of charge you get from the super run, but massively increases your shield. So basically, instead of running around building up this charge, you run around, build up the charge slightly quicker, but massively build up your shield. And this helped out massively during boss fights, void bosses in general, where I can just be like, okay, I'm low on shield, I'll run around a bit, build up my charge, build up my shield. Another one with Falbury basically makes it so every time I'm standing in water I do extra damage. So it's interesting to find these modules that they slightly change the way your abilities work. For example, with the invisible one, I've forgotten their name, it turns their ability into their third ability, the stun grenade, into removes electrical resistance. So if you have a boss that has a high electrical resistance, enemies that have electrical resistance, it completely removes that. So you can use your ability to get rid of it, and then you can either use your sword, that's an electrical ability, or your ultimate or final move, fourth ability, to do even more damage to them. So it's interesting that these modules exist, that they change the way some abilities work and change the way you want to kind of play that character. So that's good. Also, the modules don't get any stronger, they just get cheaper. So the legendary ones, the orange ones, you put points into them, they're just going to get cheaper, which is nice. I kind of like the fact that these modules change the way you slightly play them. I haven't seen multiple modules for the same character. I'm hoping there is, maybe in game or later on, because changing the way the character slightly plays is interesting. Maybe you don't really care about Bonnie gaining shield, so you don't ever use it. Maybe you need to be a bit more tanky and pull aggro, so you may want to do something like that. Interesting stuff. A lot of the time I end up putting aggro on some of the bosses because, you know, you're playing with people who may be doing the dungeon for the first time, and you've done the dungeon for the 20th time trying to get these characters, and you end up pulling aggro. So you're like, okay, well, at least I know if I run around with the shield thing, I can generate it. So gameplay's solid, but it's everything else that lets it down. So the art style is so generic modern sci-fi gaming that if you take these characters and put them into something else, like Stellar Blade, all the female characters feel like you could just lift them up and put them in Stellar Blade, and they'll be like, yeah, there you go. They semi-fit. It really needed to have its own identity. A lot of it just looks so generic that you would be mistaken if it was taken from some other game. Honestly, the team probably needs to spend more time designing and building this world to make it look more unique. There's clearly some thought put behind it, but because like the starting point is almost so generic sci-fi that it feels like they didn't really expand or could go too far with it. It's like they took the core stuff from Warframe and then went, well, add a graphic hook. And then they went, okay, we'll take all this generic sci-fi stuff and then we'll just call them Descendants instead. Done. They have Arcana, which is like magical ability. Oh, okay, that's not unique. NPCs, characters in this game feel very one-dimensional, and often than not, I get confused about who's talking. If you're blazing through the story, you're going through like an instance, and then these characters talking, and at some point you're just like, I don't know who's who. They try and give them a little bit of personality here and there, like they may give them a little quip, but it's just like not enough to stand out. They're too generic. The only one who gets any real story in this is basically Bunny, because they have their own side quest. Apart from that, every Descendant has usually got like a whole area that may be dedicated to 3 Descendants, or usually 2, and they're like, oh, we gotta go do this thing now. Okay, goodbye. It's interesting that I think the first 3 Descendants all turn up in like the last 2 levels, because I guess the game assumes by then that you've stopped using those Descendants and using the other ones that you've gotten throughout the game. It's a fair point. But yeah, they're just so generic. I mean, their designs are okay, but if you look at them, if you show them with other designs from other sci-fi modern games, and then do you think they're all from the same game, you probably go like, yeah, probably, yeah. It doesn't have its own unique identity, which is why I feel like it's going to struggle standing out. It does the whole thing where you can swap out costumes and cosmetics, and does the standard made bunnies and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, cool, I guess. But it needs to do more. It needs to do something. It needs to do something that makes it look and feel like this is it. But because it's already created such a strong, well, not strong, such an identity already, that I don't know where they can go with it. Hopefully future updates give the characters more backstory, and hopefully they go into the writing team and be like, okay, instead of just trying to write so it progresses the story, like we just need the characters to get to point A to point B, because well, that's what it feels like, is they're just pushing you to move forward. They don't really want to give you a reason why they're moving forward. They don't want to inject their own story, personality, resolve and stuff. They're literally just going, please go forward, or by the way, my teammates died here, please go forward. It's like, no, show me, you're a visual medium. You can do a cutscene at the, like, maybe at the end of another dungeon, or during a dialogue sequence where Alpha goes into great depth about his teammates, and then maybe there's a side mission where you get the recordings for the teammates, and you're like listening to it while you're going to the next one and the next one and the next one. It doesn't do enough to drag you into the world and make you feel like you're a part of it, make the world feel alive. It feels like there are just a bunch of NPCs standing there going, I am sad. My teammates have died. Please go to this area to kill this thing now, but please don't. I don't want it to die. Thank you. exposition dump, exposition dump, exposition dump. Also, the guide, it's such a, it calling it the guide, who is basically your guide, the guide, is so generic. It almost perfectly fits the game's theme of we've created something decent, that everything is decent, it's all decent, but nothing is excellent, nothing is above, beyond just meeting expectations. It's like, we're going to make a game, it's going to look like this, and that's it. We've done everything, we've done the barest minimum we can do to make a good product, but we didn't go the extra 10 miles to make it really stand out, to make it really shine. Some of the cutscenes are very good when they don't crash your computer. But yeah, everything just feels very generic. Like they're creating so many characters that they did not have enough time to flesh them out. It feels like they have like, we need to make 10 Descendants and then we need to make 20 side characters. Alright, what do? Well, we don't have enough time to flesh them all out. So let's not do that. Let's just try and give them some traits of personality. Bunny's hyperactive. Also didn't want to be a bunny, and so that's their backstory. Alpha doesn't feel like he should be captain, but we don't know that until right in the middle, end game-ish, mid-game point. You know, it's just so generic that I feel like they need more time to flesh these characters out. And given it's a live service game, they could probably flesh it out. They could have time to give the characters more personality, but it definitely feels like they're all just set dressing. They're all just designed to push you along, which makes the game feel generic. At least the gameplay is solid. Okay, so this has basically turned into another rambling video. 80 hours in and I still feel the same. It's solid. You're going to have fun, but I question the longevity of this game. Endgame now is just all about getting Descendants, getting more equipment to make your Descendants more powerful, getting items so you can get better patterns, so you can then get better gear and get better Descendants, all that stuff. So you're just incrementally increasing your power. That's fine. Hopefully there's more story missions coming soon, maybe in like a couple of months. Maybe some side quests. The game desperately needs some extra side quests, because a lot of the side quests are basically, go get this weapon, go get this Descendant, go get this other Descendant. Okay, go do this story mission, go do this thing so we can teach you that this is the end game. The only true side quest in the whole entire game is Bunny side quest, which is basically go find these recordings and then you go do the first or second dungeon or instance again, just as Bunny. That's it. That is the whole side story. They need more of that. They need more side quests. They need to have characters have their own story beats, so you can get more information about them, more backstories. So if you're watching developers, please start working on side quests. Even if it would have massively helped going back to, I don't know if I mentioned this, I might have deleted this bit of the recording, but during the bio dungeon thing, the whole plot there is medical corpse has been captured and you're going to rescue them, but it turns out at the end they've all been turned into a monster and you have to kill them. It would have been great if there was a side quest where you work with the medical corpse with those members. You have some emotional attachment to them, rather than they're just another obstacle for you to beat again and 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 again until you get like enough patterns so that you can try and go get the component you need, but you didn't get the component you need, so you need to go back in and do it again and again and again. Or in my case, and in a lot of people's cases, you just want the one drop for a component for a Descendant, and you just kept going and trying and trying, and it would not drop, and it would not drop, and it would not drop. And for your friends, dropped like 4 times now. They've got 5 of them, and you haven't got 1, and you've been doing the same amount, and you're just like, for the love of God, just give me this one goddamn component. Anyway, you're gonna have a fun time. I'm not sure about the longevity. They could turn it around, and I think it's more about just getting more story building the world more, trying to make the characters feel more like characters rather than just signposts. So yeah, that's my 80-hour conclusion of the First Descendant. Characters need to be characters. Don't change much of the gameplay. Or maybe add more modules in that change the way characters function. So that would be nice. You know, I definitely like how those modules do change the way they function, and I want to see more of it. Anyway, if you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. Comment below what you thought, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye. It's really windy out there.
Morse. Marvelous. Together on the track. Let's go. Red sus, red sus. Red sus, red sus. Red sus, red sus. Red sus, sus. Red sus, red sus. Red sus, red sus. Red sus, red sus. Red sus, sus.